Before the spotlight, before the fame, there were the guitarists who quietly built the entire foundation of R&B and soul. The grooves you love, the chords you feel in your chest, yeah, they came from players most people never even see on the album cover. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 12 underrated guitarists who changed R&B and soul forever, from the smooth architects of Motown to the geniuses who shaped neo-soul from the shadows. If you love the sound of real soul music, this is the list you've been waiting for.
Have I ever been front to you? And surely can't.
I still remember the first time I saw Nile Rodgers play up close. It wasn't in a stadium, and it definitely wasn't on TV. It was in a small New York studio, the kind of place where the walls sweat and the groove never sleeps. Nile walked in calm, quiet, almost too calm for someone who had already changed the direction of R&B and soul. But then he picked up that guitar. And suddenly everything made sense. The thing about Nile is this: it's never about showing off. It's about feel. It's about leaving just enough space for the groove to breathe. That chucking rhythm he plays, clean, sharp, and steady, is the heartbeat of so many songs that carried people through the late 70s and 80s.
Alice in every headlight. Alice. Yeah.
Now, Lowell George. That man was a different kind of magician. Not the loud, fiery type, more like the player who sneaks up on you.
Driven the back roads so I wouldn't get wet.
Hits one note and suddenly you sit up a little straighter because you felt something you can't explain. Lowell wasn't advertised as an R&B or soul guitarist. And maybe that's why he slipped under the radar. But if you were around musicians in the 70s, especially the ones who cared about tone and touch, you heard his name whispered with a kind of respect you can't fake.
To be moving.
I watched guitarists study his phrasing the same way singers studied Sam Cooke. It wasn't just the slide technique. Though that was smooth as melted butter. It was the way he bent a note like he was trying to tell you a story he wasn't ready to say out loud. When you grow up listening to the Isley Brothers, you hear the sweet vocals first. You hear Ronald's smooth delivery, the harmonies, the warmth in every line. That's what the world remembers. But when I first caught Ernie Isley tearing through a rehearsal, I realized the group had a quiet weapon hiding in plain sight. A guitarist who could match the emotion of the vocals with the fire of his strings. Ernie had this rare balance. He could float like silk on the soft songs and then erupt like a volcano on the more intense ones. It wasn't rock, it wasn't funk, it wasn't soul, it was all three at once. A fusion only he seemed to understand fully. I remember one night after a show, someone said, "Man, that kid plays like he's carrying a different kind of electricity." They were right. Ernie gave the Isley Brothers a whole other dimension.
So people get ready for the train to Jordan.
Curtis Mayfield was one of those people you couldn't forget once you met him. Soft-spoken, humble, almost shy in the way he moved. If you didn't know better, you'd think he was just another quiet man in the corner. But when he strapped on that guitar, something in the room shifted.
Faith is the key. Open the doors of boredom.
Curtis didn't approach the guitar like most players. He didn't attack it, he didn't wrestle with it, he guided it gently, carefully, the same way he guided people through the social and emotional weight of his lyrics. His guitar tone was warm and comforting, but there was always a truth inside it, a gospel spirit,
against the kingdom's throne. You know there's no
a sense of hope mixed with frustration. His melodic phrases carry more emotion than some singers could pull out of their own voices. I remember the first time I heard Shuggie Otis play. I was sitting in a tiny club a few feet away from the stage, and he picked up that guitar like it was an extension of himself. What hit me first wasn't the notes, it was the feeling. Shuggie was just a kid, but he played like he had lived 1,000 lifetimes. His style wasn't just R&B, wasn't just funk, wasn't just soul. It was a swirling mix of all three with a hint of psychedelia thrown in. And somehow it worked. Somehow it made perfect sense. You could hear the experimental touches in his chord voicings and rhythms, even his electronic touches, subtle, creative, ahead of their time, didn't feel gimmicky. They felt like the future speaking through a guitar. And the craziest part, most of the world didn't catch on until decades later. But if you were there in the room, watching him move his fingers across the strings, you knew something monumental was happening. Angelo Earl wasn't a household name, and he didn't need to be. I met him once during a late-night studio session, the kind of session where the lights are dim and everyone is just chasing the perfect groove. Angelo quietly plugged in, picked up his guitar, and suddenly the entire room shifted. He had this uncanny ability to connect with everyone in the band, the drummer, the bassist, even the keyboardist, and make them all feel like they were playing together as one. From Al Green to Isaac Hayes, he left his fingerprints on countless records, and yet most people had no idea who he was. Angelo's tone was smooth, expressive, and full of taste. He wasn't flashy, but he didn't need to be. Every note had purpose, every chord served the song. Watching him play, you realize that the magic in soul music doesn't always come from the front man. Sometimes it's the quiet, brilliant guitarist who makes everything else feel alive.
Of loving you.
Billy Butler was a master of blending styles. I remember a club where I first caught him live, his guitar singing over a smoky rhythm section. You could feel the jazz in his phrasing, the blues in his bends, and the groove of R&B in every note.
'Cause if I do, yeah.
What made Billy unique was his ability to teach the guitar vocabulary of soul without ever saying a word. Younger guitarists, even without realizing it, were picking up his tricks, his licks, his phrasing, and taking them into the wider R&B world.
Oh, you belong to another.
He wasn't just a session guitarist, he was a bridge. He connected jazz sophistication with the heart of soul music. And when you heard him play, it wasn't just skill you felt, it was soul. Deep, human, unforgettable. If you grew up on Motown, you know the songs, you know the grooves, but I bet most of you never thought about the guitarist behind them. Robert White? He was the quiet genius behind some of the most famous riffs in history. I was in a small recording studio one night, watching him track a take of My Girl. The riff was deceptively simple, but the way he played it, precise, melodic, yet swinging with effortless feel, it was like watching a master craftsman at work. Every little nuance, every subtle bend, every ghost note carried magic. And yet, for all his brilliance, Robert White stayed in the shadows. Most listeners sang the words, hummed the melody, and moved to the groove, completely unaware of the hand shaping the entire song. Watching him, you realize just how much of Motown's signature sound was born in the fingers of guitarists like him.
She came from California.
I'll never forget stepping into a Motown studio back in the late 60s and seeing Joe Messina there. He wasn't flashy, no stage antics, no ego, just a man with a guitar, leaning in, listening. But the moment he started playing, the entire room came alive.
All the way from California.
Joe had this disciplined, jazz-infused style that gave Motown its signature swing. Every note, every chord, every tiny fill wasn't just decoration, it was part of a blueprint. The bass line, the horns, the vocals, they all fit perfectly because of the space Joe created with his guitar. He wasn't about stealing the spotlight, he was about holding it all together. And when you hear a Motown track from that era, you're hearing Joe Messina's fingerprints all over it. Without him, the groove, the magic, the feel of those songs would never have existed. Then there was Wah Wah Watson. I saw him play live once, and it was like watching someone conjure spells with his fingers. The name isn't just a nickname, it's a warning. That wah-wah pedal in his hands wasn't a toy. It was a voice, a mood, a personality. From the Temptations to Herbie Hancock, his tone changed how people thought about guitar in R&B and funk. You didn't just hear Wah Wah Watson, you felt him. That fluid, expressive sound he coaxed out of the instrument added a layer of emotion that nobody else could replicate. And yet, most listeners didn't know his name. They just knew the music moved them. But I was there, watching every subtle twist of the pedal, every nuanced pluck and slide. That was artistry, pure and undeniable. Spanky Alford was different. Quiet, unassuming, almost shy. But when he played, it was like watching someone speak the language of heaven through 6 strings. I was in a studio with him once, and even the most seasoned musicians fell silent, just listening. His chord voicings were lush, full of color and emotion. Every extension, every embellishment had a purpose. And his gospel sensibility? That gave neo-soul its soul. Artists like D'Angelo, Erykah Badu, Raphael Saadiq, they all carry a piece of Spanky in their sound. He taught us something crucial. The guitar isn't just an instrument. It's a voice. It's a storyteller. And in neo-soul, his voice is everywhere, whispering, breathing life into the music. Finally, Cornell Dupree. The man could play anything, anywhere, with anyone, and make it feel effortless. I saw him in a recording studio once, and it was like watching a master painter at work. Every chord, every lick, every note was exactly where it needed to be. Over 2,500 recordings. Aretha Franklin, Donny Hathaway, Bill Withers, the list goes on, yet most people never knew his name. That's the kind of genius we're talking about. The subtlety, the groove, the timing. That's the DNA of soul guitar. Cornell didn't just play the notes. He felt the music. He became part of it. And that's why, even decades later, the soul of R&B is still standing on the shoulders of giants like him. The journey doesn't end here, R&B soul lovers. Watch this next.